Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's another episode of Let's Talk Good Broncos. I don't know so much about the good right now. I don't know. We're going to discuss a little bit about the quarterbacks today, but we got Zach, we got Will. Let's get straight into it. All right, guys, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks today. We're going to talk about what the hell the Broncos do at the quarterback position. We have a little bit of a little thing set up for you guys. We're going to have different options here. We have a wheel we're going to spin, and we're going to talk about these quarterbacks just in that way. Zach, do you want to add anything further to that?
No, not at all. We got the wheel right here. I don't know if it's sharing my screen right now. We got the wheel right here. We got our options: Jimmy Garoppolo, Taysom Hill, Baker Mayfield, Justin Fields, Jacoby Brissett, Mac Jones, Sam Darnold, Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, Russell Wilson. I think that's all of them. Maybe I named some of them twice.
A real murderer's row of quarterbacks here.
Right? I mean, truly elite. I think I should add maybe Kirk. If anyone watching wants me to add names to the wheel, I tried to just think of the vet options that are on the table. If there's some I forgot, comment and I'll try and add them.
All right. Sounds good to me, man. I'm very excited to talk about Drew Lock today. That's something I'm just ecstatic about. All right, cool. Spin the wheel, Zach. Let's see. And then who wants to talk about it first? Let's go Will first on this quarterback here.
Yeah, let's do it.
Dun, 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 dun. Jimmy G. How hyped up would you be, Will? Let us know.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I think my hype level would be a 3, roughly a 3. I think I could talk myself into like a 5, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
1 point for, obviously, the elephant in the room, very handsome. Another point, just because I think he is probably kind of tailor-made for the Sean Payton offense. Like he's I don't know how well he worked in Josh McDaniel's scheme, but he gets rid of the ball quickly. He's got just a lightning quick release. I think he makes good decisions. And he's someone who follows coaching, which I think is something that Sean Payton wants.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I think I'd be right up there with you. This one, to me, it feels like, all right, we're ready to – well, I think almost all of these on this list really would be, okay, the Broncos are willing to accept that they're getting worse before they're getting better is almost what this feels like. And I'm not opposed to that. I think that's ultimately what they should do. And Jimmy G is like you said, I think he is kind of tailor-made for this offense. And when you've seen him in good situations, I mean, the Niners went to the Super Bowl with him, right? That's something to be said about him. I don't think anybody else on this list has that sort of pedigree. I think obviously he might be coming off the worst year of anybody on this list, but we've seen it before, right? We've seen it before with him, which is something different that differentiates him from the rest of the list. Zach, what do you think?
I almost did it, so I had to stop, pause, readjust, unmute myself before I started talking. I would be okay with it. From a pure quarterbacking standpoint, I think it's the least exciting option on the table. A few weeks ago, Joey and I did our quarterback rankings list, and I was not excited with what Jimmy Garoppolo showed this year. I think he showed in a lot of ways that he was like Kyle Shanahan merchant, maybe not a really great quarterback and just kind of being propped up by that scheme and system in San Francisco. But I think what is so appealing about him is he could set up the Broncos pretty well if they want to kind of do what Joey's talking about and commit to a real rebuild, which I think they probably should do. I talked about it on the last show, but feels like they can't get it right, and they've just been stuck here for 9 years because they're living in purgatory. They're not bottoming out, and as a result, they're not hitting rock bottom. They refuse to hit rock bottom, and so they're not really remedying their problems. Jimmy G, the reason you're signing Jimmy G, just to be real, is because you can sign him for a vet minimum deal. There are very few arguments for Jimmy G beyond that. because they would apply stronger to one of the other veteran options out there. I think in most cases, like any perceived upside that Jimmy G might have. I think there's several options with way more. He's very cheap. That's the upshot. And if you sign Jimmy G, I think this team is doing the hard and painful thing to get to the right place. My excitement level, yeah, I'll say like a 5. Because like, oh man, 2024, I'm going to think is a slog, but I'm going to be optimistic that they're building the thing the right way.
Now, I think if I can add one thing,
yeah,
everybody wants to like do what the Buccaneers did last year in terms of their quarterback situation. They're in cap hell. They got Baker Mayfield for what was it, like 1 year, $4 million, something like that.
Super cheap.
And everybody's like, okay, sign Baker Mayfield. It's like, well, that doesn't apply this year because he's not going to cost $4 million. You have to find the next Baker Mayfield. And it's kind of one of those situations where you have to buy low on a guy after the worst year of his career, which is what the Buccaneers did. Like that odyssey that Baker Mayfield was on in 2022 was absolutely like the low point of his career. And Jimmy Garoppolo is coming off of his. So if you're really trying to recreate what Tampa Bay did last year, I'm not saying it has to be Garoppolo, but you're kind of looking for the model where you just buy low, essentially.
And you know what, Will? I think that's a good point. And if you're really putting this in perspective, I don't think the Raiders really didn't get much better. They were a dumpster fire all the way up until they fired McDaniels, right? And then by that time, if I'm not mistaken, Jimmy G was already on the bench and O'Connell was in. And
they did that. They made the swap when the firing happened. So that's part of the shitty thing there is we don't get like, what did Aiden O'Connell look like with Josh? What did Jimmy G look like with Pierce? Because I agree, that's when the flip happened or the switch was flipped. It just unfortunately also happens to be when the quarterback change was made. So it's hard to read it.
Absolutely. And then also like just like, this would, because of that, you're wondering if you are buying low here, because I think in years in the past, we've seen he's never been like an elite quarterback by any means, but we've definitely seen a better version of Jimmy Garoppolo than we saw last year. So if you can get towards more what we saw in prior years, I think it's not a bad option to sign him for a vets minimum. I guess mine would be more, I would lean it more towards a 6, maybe.
Everybody's like, yeah, but thing for Garoppolo is the 2019 playoffs.
Yeah.
It's always, well, he only threw the ball like 6 times in the championship game. And the retort for that is like, well, they didn't need to. Raheem Mostert ran for like 220 yards. It's like you can't really count that against them. Like the Titans did the same thing that same postseason. The one thing you can knock was missing Emmanuel Sanders and then throwing a no-look interception at the end of that game. But, of course, to fuck up in the Super Bowl, you have to first be in the Super Bowl.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I love the Jimmy G, last thing I'll say, and then we can get to the next one, but I love the Jimmy G Baker comp. I think they're both those like kind of somewhere in the middle tier. I think if we were like 2 seasons ago, if you go back 24 months, we could be debating like who's the most mediocre NFL quarterback. Is it Kirk Cousins? Is it Ryan Tannehill? Is it Baker Mayfield? Is it Jimmy G? Like, I think those guys, again, not all that long ago, were right in that same tier. And I think some have separated in a positive way, and some like Garoppolo and Mayfield have separated in a negative way. And as a result, you were able to get Mayfield for $4 million a year. You're able to get Jimmy G for the veteran minimum. A team will be able, honestly, even applies to Russell Wilson. You'll be able to get Russell Wilson for a veteran minimum. And like, that's a solid deal. A mediocre quarterback on that type of contract it can absolutely create surplus value or be a benefit to the roster. And I think there is some value in having an adult quarterback, like a guy who you know can run an offense, something that frankly we still don't know about Drew Lock, because you're going to be able to evaluate the offensive line, the coaching staff, the surrounding weapons better, rather than like, remember the constant Lock debates? Like, no, it's the offensive coordinator. No, it's the offensive line. No, it's the weapons. No, it's Lock. Like, you couldn't determine what the mess was because the offense couldn't run. I don't know. I'm done.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think we wrapped up the Jimmy G conversation pretty well. Zach, pull up the wheel again. Let's do this thing. And Zach, I'll let you start this time. You go first on this quarterback.
Let's see who I get. No whammies, no whammies, no whammies.
I love it.
Oh, you for our audio listeners, I almost got Drew Lock instead. I got Joe Flacco. This
I
is
like
a
that you
fun
paired
one.
them together.
Yeah, right.
It does make sense.
Well, that's how it happened. I thought about Drew Lock, and then I was like, "Oh, Joe Flacco's out there." That 2019 Broncos season. Yeah, I would be very happy with Joe. I think it's kind of like very similar to Garoppolo, but I don't know. Maybe you don't have like a positive mentorship thing, but Flacco seemed like he turned over a new leaf in that Browns locker room and was absolutely beloved in there. He didn't seem like a malcontent. He played like really good football. I think there's a very good chance it was I don't know, Cinderella dream, and a Cinderella situation, and the clock is bound to strike midnight eventually. I think it kind of happened in that Houston Texans playoff game. But by any metric, like it wasn't just the system. We've seen other quarterbacks, like even Deshaun Watson in the system. It wasn't the system. It wasn't the surrounding talent. He's down Nick Chubb. He's down like a bajillion offensive linemen. And he was doing great. Like look at his numbers mitigating pressure. He was awesome there. His numbers in the red zone, awesome there. Numbers targeting downfield, awesome there. Mitigating turnovers. Maybe he's like the one thing he struggled with. Everything else was awesome. And he had so many positives that they more than outweighed the turnovers he created. It was pretty exceptional. And like the Garoppolo move, I think this would be a pretty cheap signing that signals you're ready to tear it down and start building for the future. You're not, I don't think we're going to have any John Elway quotes from Sean Payton where he talks about Joe Flacco's our answer and he's just entering his prime or whatever. It'll be a very clear Band-Aid move. And if the Broncos aren't going to find their long-term answer this offseason, I want it to be a Band-Aid. I want it to be a guy that sets them up to move off of them rather than like going all in on Baker Mayfield. And then it's like, great, now we're paying Baker Mayfield $30 million a year.
Absolutely. Will, what do you think about Joe Flacco?
I think that's a good point that you made, Zach, earlier, in that he kind of turned over a new leaf, or at least it seems like it, because when Denver traded for him, right? They traded like a late round pick for him.
I think it was. I believe it was a late
Okay.
round.
Yeah. I mean, he seemed like maybe like reasonably so, a little bit bitter following basically getting benched for Lamar Jackson in 2018. And he came into a situation where he wanted to be the guy. And then they saw that they had basically drafted his replacement in the second round in Drew Lock. And he's still in that space in his career where he wants to hang on to the banner of, elite franchise quarterback, which at times he has been. But now he's like 38, 39. He's kind of surprisingly old, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe not that old, but I think the same thing about Garoppolo. Like, he probably understands his role in the organization more. And I think, I don't know that you recreate what you had in Cleveland. Historically investing in Joe Flacco after an all-time run is not the wisest move. But like Zach said, like, all you really need is a Band-Aid and a cheap contract.
Yeah. And I thought, like, I don't think anyone can really take away from what he was doing out there last year. I thought that was fun to watch. I was like,
yeah,
I was a big Joe Flacco fan for a couple weeks there. I mean, in the playoffs, I was sitting there watching Joe Flacco. I was watching it with Zach. And Zach,
we had real debates about Joe Flacco.
Heavy, and I don't know. I just liked, I don't know. I was rooting for the guy. I think a lot of that was just like, I'm old. This is I don't care at all right now, which is why I can see the turnovers up so high. Like, I don't care. I'm going to throw this down the field. I'm going to make a big play. I'm not going to play conservative. I'm not going to do all this other stuff. What I think you saw earlier in his career, even the year before with the Jets, like, he was terrible with the Jets. Something clicked with the Browns. Ultimately, for a 1 year, I wouldn't hate it. I just also at the same time with his age, you're sitting there wondering, like, who's my backup? I think more than some of these other guys on the list, because I think there's a chance just at his age, he just won't finish the season. We could have a situation like that happen. But ultimately, I think it's an okay option. What would you guys 1 out of 10 here? Is it higher than Jimmy Garoppolo?
I'm gonna go 6.
6. Okay.
I'm gonna go a little higher than Jimmy, but not a scorcher by any means.
All right. Fair. What do you
Oh
think?
yeah, I didn't throw a number on this one. Yeah, I'll go 6. I'm right in line with that. I think it's a little more exciting, but not by a ton.
All right, cool. Zach, pull the wheel back up.
Absolutely. Here. Oh my God. Sorry. I'm trying to drive this process. Get out of Joe Flacco and on to the next. Oh man, I want us to talk about him.
Drew Lock. We're all landing on one side of the wheel here. Drew Lock for me, guys, like, I don't know. It's just interesting on this list. We just have a bunch of former starters, multi-year starters on this list, and then we have Drew Lock, who started for like, what was it, like a little, like almost a year. I think all of his games combined for the Broncos there. It's just interesting to me. Like, I think more of the appeal here is just that he used to be on the Broncos. I don't know, like, if he were on any other team, would we be vying for Drew Lock, saying he still has more in the tank? I don't know. I'm not sure. He did have that one really spectacular game this year. I thought, though, like in the preseason, I see it because Broncos fans are still very on Drew Lock, still like paying attention to Drew Lock. Saw the clips on the timeline. In the preseason, it didn't look as good. I just don't know if I'd put my eggs in this basket. I think some of these guys that I've seen it from are a better option as a bridge than Drew Lock, just in my opinion. Will, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, this is gonna be a no for me. I just can't do it again.
Yeah.
I can't. It's not that he's the worst option on this list. I just can't like reinvest myself in it, and I don't want to reignite that whole debate because so much time and energy wasted over like a C- quarterback. Like it's the one thing when players are polarizing like Brock Purdy, and he's like pretty good, and then there's quarterbacks who are polarizing, but they're not even like interesting or good. It's just such a waste of time. But at this stage of his career, he's a real underdog, which leads me
which leads you to
speaking of C- segues. Today's episode is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. And oh my God, Colorado Pick'em Champions is now available in our great state, as well as Tennessee. This is a peer-to-peer version of Pick'ems, and if you get the most correct picks in your contest, you win your share of the champion's prize. But what I love, me personally, is now I have the option to pick stat totals and not just fantasy points. This is amazing, ... Almost as amazing as Underdog's Super Bowl giveaway. All you need is to have a verified Underdog account to qualify, and Underdog for the big game is giving away $1 million in Underdog credit. 1 million in all caps. So sign up at Underdog with my link below or code Let's Ride. So you qualified for the million. Make your first deposit and they will match you up to $100. Once again, that is code Let's Ride. Sign up at Underdog now, right now. Stop what you're doing. Actually, keep the podcast on, but sign up right now, please.
Here's your disclaimer. Will, have you got this down yet or no? Are we still?
Must be 18 plus 21, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Zach,
what do you think about the major Underdog and Drew Lock? What is your opinion there?
I kind of alluded to this on one of our earlier shows. I forget which. But I don't know. I don't see a lot of like growth from Drew Lock. I think the argument for him, kind of like you said, Joey, it's like, yeah, he used to be a Bronco. And I think there's like the like X element to it. Like, oh, things didn't work out with the person we were just with. And maybe we get back together with our ex. I don't know. They were familiar. And yeah, there were a lot of things we liked about him and it didn't work out, but this time will be different. And they've grown. But if you look at that X, you actually like look at what they've done. They haven't grown at all. They're the identical like you could look at everything. They always left you on red. They're still leaving people on red. They're all of it. Drew Lock, you look at his turnover worthy play rate. Where was it in Seattle this season? It was at 5.5%. That is worse than any year of his career in Denver. And in 2019, he was at 4.3, climbed to 4.5 in 2020, and then was back down to 2.9 in 2021. His big time throw rate, he's always thrown turnovers, but he's also done a great job at creating explosive plays. This year, he had a big time throw, an impressive throw, 2.5% of the time. His worst year in Denver was 3%. That was his rookie year. 2020, when he was a full-time starter, that was 6.4%. So again, he's almost worse in some ways. Pressure to sack ratio, kind of struggled mitigating sacks that last year. 22% of his pressures in 2021 turned into sacks. Where was it in Seattle this season? 19.4%. Almost the exact same, almost identical. You can look at accuracy stats too, like on target rate and whatever. I've done this for EPA per play. I don't have them all handy in front of me. But it is shocking, frankly, how similar Seattle Drew Lock is, at least in terms of stats, to Broncos Drew Lock. And I don't need more of that experience. I think it's pretty clear what he is. Joe, you alluded to his awesome game this season. But please, I implore, and I know you're just like, I'm not trying to dunk on you here, but it is a wide belief that like that was a great game. Watch that game back, people. It is not. Like he really struggles against the Matt Patricia Eagles defense that then went on to be the very worst defense in football. And he closed it great. He had 2 awesome drives. He had a couple amazing throws to finish that game off. But the first 3 quarters of the game, when he was very bad against, again, what went on to be the worst defense in the NFL, that still counts, as do his other performances this season when he comes in that Rams game and throws a grisly interception almost immediately. So bad that an injured Geno Smith is like, screw this. I know I'm injured. I'm coming back into this game. I can't let this guy do this. The Drew Lock thing ran its course in Denver. He ain't it. If you want the young guy that could have been with upside, pound the table for Justin Fields.
Can I just to play like devil's advocate? I think the one thing we can give him, hypothetically at least, is this is the first time like he'll have a true offensive coach, above him. He goes from Scangarello his first year, who I think is had his moments definitely, but has proven that he's not an NFL caliber coach, to Pat Shurmur, how we feel about him. And then to Shane Waldron, I believe, in Seattle. I don't know if you guys saw that clip with Jackson Smith and Jigba at media day. It was the Bears. One of the local Bears outlets was interviewing them. And then because they just signed, they hired Shane Waldron as their new OC. And he goes like, what is Justin Fields getting in Shane Waldron? He goes, are we live? Not a ringing endorsement. So that made me think Drew Lock hasn't always played with the most brilliant offensive minds. So if you get him in a building with Sean Payton, maybe he finds a way to get the most out of him, but I don't know what the most looks like, honestly.
I totally agree with you. I think that it probably would have helped him earlier in his career, but now, like, I'm imagining the pairing of Sean Payton and Drew Lock, and I think that if people thought that Vic Fangio hated Drew Lock,
yeah, that's a good point.
It's gonna be out of control with Sean Payton. The happy birthdays, it's not even gonna be mentioned. Nothing like that. But yeah, I just don't know about that pairing. It's kind of a weird one for me.
I just went back and kind of randomly watched the 2009 Saints Americas game.
Yeah.
And Sean Payton's obviously one of the talking heads. He's like an asshole. Yeah. I think it's underrated how much of an asshole he is. But you can always put up with it when you're a great coach. And like he and Breeze got along well, just because, Breeze is kind of a perfectionist. Oh my God. Like
Way to go on.
he's something else.
I personally love an asshole coach. I was a fan of
Yeah,
Fangio.
why not?
I'm a huge fan of Sean Payton. The press conference is just more interesting, in my
Yeah.
opinion. I get, but Zach, let's pull the wheel back up, man. Let's spin this thing.
Let's do it. All right. Next, we did Drew Lock. Hopefully it doesn't hit us with another awful one.
They're all
Oh my God,
awful.
you
Let's
gotta be
be real
kidding me.
here. I mean, we can all see
Ooh.
this.
You gotta be kidding.
Ugh.
Well, it worked out because we just had someone commenting, like, are these guys just doing stupid speculation, or is Russell Wilson officially gone? Russell Wilson is still technically a member of the Denver Broncos, but he might as well be officially gone. Guys, it is not happening. I understand the Broncos were putting out publicly this narrative of like, hey, who knows? There's not a better option out there. We might bring him back. It's in their best interest to do so. Like generally, salesmen or teams that are trying to trade players or offload players make that asset, that item, seem a lot more appealing than it might actually be. What they're saying might not actually reflect what that item is, and that's the case here. They have no benefit from letting it be well known they're cutting Russell Wilson in a few weeks. By posturing and bluffing and whatever, they have a small chance of either making Russell Wilson's camp so uncomfortable that they maybe try and put a trade together of sorts, or they make a different NFL team who really wants Russell Wilson uncomfortable enough that that they engage in a trade. Both those outcomes are very far-fetched, but it is an incentive for the Broncos to lie on this topic. They have zero incentive whatsoever to come out and go, yeah, we're cutting the guy. Because what if things did, like, I think it's far-fetched, but what if the relationship did get saved? You don't want to be in this situation where you've already come out and explicitly said, no way is this happening. It just, come on, people. Like, gravity is still technically a theory, but come on, we know, right? I think we know it's happening. The Earth being round, debated by some, still a theory. Come on, guys, let's piece that one together. Same thing with Russell Wilson.
Is this still a theory? Like once you go into space and just like look at it and see that it's round?
I mean, I would think not, but
Yeah, that feels like pretty definitive proof. I don't know.
Oh my God. I mean, okay, so Zach, I agree with you. I think that this is far-fetched. Here, I don't think that this is one that I could see actually happening, Russell Wilson coming back. I just saw the media war. I don't know if anyone else was paying attention, but when this whole thing happened, Russell Wilson and Sean Payton's media connections were going at it. It was the craziest media war I've seen. It was just like completely polar opposite views coming from each camp there. And then even you got, I mean, it's just hard for me to see this repaired at this point. How does that happen? Especially with like Russell Wilson going to the NFLPA and complaining about the Broncos and different things like that. How could this even be repaired? It's something at this point, maybe if all of that didn't come out and there wasn't the big blow up spectacle we saw in the media, this would have more legs to it. Just after that, I can't see it. Will, what is your opinion?
I think the one thing that still kind of confuses me to this day is why after they, very publicly benched him, and like you said, there was that kind of media war by proxy. Why then did they dress him as a backup in those last two games?
That was weird.
That like that's the only thing I can like hang my hat on to think like maybe it's not over. Like maybe they're trying to maintain something, but even that was like kind of grasping at straws. But I can never figure out why they did that, because like the Raiders with Derek Carr the year before, just like send him home. Like you're not here anymore. They could have dressed Ben DiNucci as the backup in case Stidham got hurt. And there is like that. There's still that 5% possibility Stidham gets hurt and Russell Wilson gets in the game, and then you go through all that to bench him over the injury clause, and then very publicly, and then he's still out there taking hits, which I never quite understood that. But Yeah, I think this is over. It's over. What's the date? March 13th, where he's probably going to be
I
cut?
think it is. Zach, what is the date? You know it.
The 13th.
March 13th. Okay.
Okay.
It is that day. It just seems far fetched to me. But here's the actual question. Here's the question I actually want to ask you guys. Would you guys be, like, not even just a likelihood thing, but let's say they do keep him and we're just all completely wrong. Are you guys happy with it? What is the 1 out of 10 scale here?
Negative. The same as like if you look up like usdebtcounter.com or whatever, and it's like negative 14 trillion and it's just like skyrocketing up every second. That number, that's how I would feel. Literally there's no benefit to it. It's crazy. It would everyone is tired of the Broncos being in purgatory or just kind of being this like middling kind of miserable franchise without an interesting offense for the last 8-9 years. If they did that, I mean, sign up for 2-3 more at least. I would hate that move in so many different ways.
Yeah. Same. Like my rating, if it's like trying to divide by 0, like the scale just blows up. I can't compute it's not happening. I don't want it to happen. And I hope it doesn't happen,
All right. Well,
it's over.
Here's what I'm going to do for the last one. I'm going to pull this wheel up, but I'm just going to ask you, Will, I'm going to ask you about a quarterback. Zach, I'm also going to ask you about a quarterback. Will, I'm going to give you Kirk Cousins. What do you think about Kirk Cousins? What's your scale there? I think probably the best quarterback we've talked about.
I'm going to go with an 8. I'll go with his jersey number 8. I think the more I've heard about it too, like I know the number seems daunting to sign him with all they have going on. Because these guys are creative, and they just brought in another guy from the Saints front office. It's like, what does the Saints front office do? They just find ways to push money as far away as they possibly can. They're like the embodiment of like that's my future self problem. I think, if they did hypothetically say they came to a number and restructured everybody's contract on the team and made it work, and Garrett Bowles is getting paid in 2072. How could you not like that? I think Kirk was awesome last year. He was on pace for 40 touchdowns and an absurd number of yards. I think he might have been on pace for like 5,000 yards. Don't fact check me on that. But I think the one thing that you would point to also is the Achilles tear.
Exactly.
At that age, like that's certainly not a guarantee that he's going to come back as strong or as nimble. And we all assume now that like Achilles aren't like as big of a deal as they were, just because we have recent memory of Cam Akers coming back and then Aaron Rodgers pretending to come back. But that's a pretty devastating injury for an older guy, even if he is a quarterback. I think I would take that risk though. He's just so competent. I think he's a great fit for the Sean Payton offense. And I think probably a good personality fit too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the more underrated quarterbacks the NFL had, especially last year, like you mentioned, his numbers were insane good last year. I thought he was having the best year of his career last year up until the injury. Zach, the quarterback I'm going to ask you about is Jacoby Brissett. Give me your opinion on Jacoby Brissett and give me a 1 out of 10.
Yeah, really quick, I did want to say something on Kirk Cousins. I do think it's getting a little overlooked how Kirk Cousins typically has like a stretch of the season every year where he's awesome. And then the problem with Kirk Cousins is he like comes back down to earth and he has those moments under the bright lights where he kind of shrivels up. And I think in some ways the memory of Kirk Cousins is aided by the fact he tore his Achilles while he was experiencing that peak.
Sure.
Normally we don't see 18 games of that Kirk Cousins. And then, I agree with everything you said about the Achilles tear. Brissett, man, Jacoby Brissett, that might be a 10. That's an 8. I mean, on this scale, I want to be clear, on this scale, not on like the all quarterbacks in the NFL scale, right? Not on the scale where Patrick Mahomes is a 10. But if you look at, it's like what, a Kansas 10? This is like a Siberia 10. You know, the options are not plentiful, and yeah, I would love Jacoby Brissett out of those. He is the only one who has looked out of everyone on that list that has looked like a top 15 quarterback each of the past 2 seasons. He's the only one who has led a top 10 offense in either of the last 2 seasons. Really, the issue with him is his name is Jacoby Brissett. He's also proven to be like a very good backup, a good locker room guy. He wasn't even given a chance to compete with Sam Howell for the starting spot this year.
Because he would have won it.
Despite it seeming like he was going to be able to compete for it. And there was never any issue, never any like whispers or rumors about like Jacoby Brissett causing drama. But then whenever he did come in, he was dramatically better. Sam Howell ranked something like 32nd in EPA per play, and Jacoby Brissett, I think, is 2nd in the NFL this year in a tiny sample size. But we're talking about the polar opposite ends of the league in terms of quarterback play in the same system. I think, yeah, Jacoby Brissett, of all the vet options out there, I would love Jacoby Brissett because I think he's going to make the Broncos fairly fun to watch this year, not screw up their chances of building for the future, and he's going to be an awesome backup once the Broncos do find their long-term quarterback.
Okay. And is there anybody else? I think that's valid point, Zach, by the way. Before I move on here, I think Jacoby would be a cheap, another option that you could move on from quickly, but I think it's maybe on the better spectrum of the guys that you can move off of quickly is what I would say, right? Like, am I expecting an elite quarterback here? No, but I'm looking at the names on this list and man, yeah, Jacoby Brissett might be better than a lot of these guys. Yeah, so I agree with you. I think that's good. Is there anybody else you guys are dying to talk about on here before we move on? Let's do Justin Fields. Let's do Justin Fields. I think that's an interesting one. What is your guys' opinion on Justin Fields? The going rate via the reports is a 2nd round pick. Now the Broncos don't even have a 2nd round pick. Which is yeah. So
3rd and Judy.
Yeah, so something would need to happen there. But would you guys trade for another quarterback even after this Russell Wilson thing? The 2nd round pick isn't a 1st round pick, but it's a top pick. It's a good pick. Would you guys trade a 2nd round pick for Justin Fields?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, second would make me a little uncomfortable if I'm being honest. But like if I can get 3rd and a little piece, yeah. Relative to the options out there, I don't know. This is one going back to our 1 to 10 scale. I feel like a 5, 6. This is kind of in the middle for me. I think he's got more upside than like any of the other options on this list. I think there's a world where he still develops into a good quarterback. I do think we've seen enough of Justin Fields now, though, that seems pretty far-fetched. I think at the very least, his legs provide you a pretty high offensive floor. Yeah, I feel kind of what I said during the Drew Lock thing. Like everyone who wants Drew Lock want Justin Fields instead. Like I know he wasn't a former Bronco, and if anything, he was on the other end of the spectrum because of the whole Surtain Fields debate. But if you want your young quarterback with a lot of upside that wasn't developed properly and has a chance of hitting, take the younger one with less experience and more talent. That's all 3 boxes checked the way you'd want them to be checked to point towards potentially developing into something special. Also the one that has shown signs of growth in recent history. All 4 boxes ticked. So again, any argument you'd make for Locke, you can make a stronger one for Justin Fields.
What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say no, just based on the asking price. I just don't think they're in a place to do that. It's also just kind of a sort of a confusing. It would be a confusing acquisition. It's like our like this is a guy who's going to hit his stride, but we're also building for the future. I just don't see it as something that makes sense. I don't know that he is Sean Payton's type of quarterback. He is more like, hard to compare him to Russell Wilson because he's obviously way more athletic, but he's not like a great on-script quarterback for sure. I also think, to Zach's point, like he's immensely talented, and he did show a lot of signs of improvement, including his best game was probably in Chicago against Denver too. That might count for something. But generally, like you don't get quarterbacks that make a huge leap heading into year 4. Usually you see it a little bit earlier. You can point to maybe Josh Allen, but I think that was year 3. I just think, like Zach, I think the odds are low that he takes that jump. But if you can get him for a late round pick or something that's not a second, basically, which, kind of moot point at right now, you don't have one. You would have to pair a player probably or package a couple picks together. If the asking price was low enough, like I think you do take that risk. But that also, like, I think that gets you out of the market for drafting a rookie too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that would be sending pretty mixed signals.
Yeah, I think ultimately it is the asking price for me, because if you threw a second in there, the idea isn't that it's okay if he isn't good.
Yeah,
that's kind of the issue there. If you're trading a second round pick for Justin Fields, you lose if he's not good. Whereas if I go out and sign Jacoby Brissett, it's like, all right, yeah, you know what? We're not investing a ton, and it's okay if he's not good. At least we're still in the market the year after. I think ultimately you could be in the market the year after, but if you trade a second round pick for Justin Fields, I'm not saying you aren't, but you traded a second round pick for Justin Fields. That's an L compared to just getting.
Yeah, you also have to make a decision on him pretty soon.
Absolutely, you do.
And so confusing too. Like, what do you? What's the deal look like?
It feels like you're playing the in between game to me again. Yeah. That's what I don't want to do. I think if it were for a later pick and I was just felt like, okay, yeah, you know what, whatever, I would be better with it. It's just the asking price. I can't do it.
My counter, I guess, on the asking price would be, I feel so much better about giving like a second or a second round equivalent, like, I don't know, a third and Judy, as I mentioned earlier. I would feel so much better about investing that in Justin Fields than I would investing pick 12 in Bo Nix or Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy. That might be how I feel about this class. I know you like yourself some JJ McCarthy, Joey, but after the top 3, I would not want to take really any of these guys in the first round for the reason you're talking about. You invest a first round or a second round pick in these guys, you're going to be playing out the string with them. It's important that they work out. Look at Drew Lock, who was a second round pick. I'm not interested in doing that with a 26-year-old who played in like a pretty goofy offense where he was throwing to wide open receivers all the time. That doesn't appeal to me. I don't want to do that. So like Justin Fields, who's just as young, if not younger, has a ton of physical ability, and we've seen him run a solid NFL offense and show signs of growth. I'd kind of prefer that gamble. But I do agree. The problem with Justin Fields is the asking price is a little high. Fortunately, I think there's a good chance it comes down from there. We'll see. Maybe there really is a lot of demand for Fields, but if you start going through like the quarterback openings this offseason and the veterans, Russell Wilson included, that we think are going to be out there taking up starting spots, like Kirk Cousins is going to get a starting spot somewhere. The game of musical chairs gets a little tough eventually, where I don't think you're going to have 3-4 teams bidding up the value of Justin Fields. I think there's maybe a team or two, and as a result, they'll probably be able to get him, I think, a fourth or a third. If he goes for a second, I won't be surprised, but if I had to bet, I think he goes for a surprisingly cheap amount. If I had to bet, I think a lot of the reporting about his cost is coming from the Bears camp as opposed to teams that want Justin Fields.
Yeah, it feels like suspiciously high. And when it does feel suspiciously high, like that tells you that this is coming from a very interested party.
Right. And a fourth I could live with.
Yeah.
Like, just to take a shot on a guy. But anyways, I think that's it for today's show, guys. I think we hit on most of the quarterbacks. There are still some on there. But I don't think people really want to hear about Mac Jones and so these other guys all too much. But yeah, I think that's it, guys. See you guys next week. Will, what can they be on the lookout for, man?
We did a let's see. We basically previewed the Super Bowl. I don't know if you've heard about that, but they're playing the Super Bowl on Sunday.
No, it was Sunday.
Yeah, we did a video on the Jets that came out, I think Monday, and upcoming we have basically what we talked about today, kind of predicting the free agent quarterbacks, where they'll end up. So that'll probably be on YouTube at some point tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, and if you guys make sure you're definitely going to check all of that out. If you guys like Zach and I's content, Bree's also over there. We have other creators. Come over to Let's Talk Broncos. Check us out. Until next time, guys.